Hi everybody, Scott here from the Introvert Power channel. In this video I want to talk about what the MBTI can and can't do. So this isn't going to be an exhaustive exploration of this topic, but more just putting out a few thoughts and ideas around this topic. There's a real danger for people to try and explain something in the MBTI that it can't explain. What I mean by that is, like the MBTI, on the surface of it is a very simple process, in the sense of if we look at the four letters, it helps us to discover our inborn preferences. So now I should just put out there, for most of my subscribers this is sort of given information, but for new people this might be new information, so I'll go through it again. So the four dichotomies: you've got introverted and extroverted. So that looks at how we gain energy, introverted through introversion or extroversion. The second dichotomy, sensing versus intuition, talks about how we take in information. The third dichotomy, thinking versus feeling, is how we make decisions. And the fourth function, judging and perceiving, is how we orientate ourselves to the outer world and explore possibilities. Sorry, when I say explore possibilities, judges usually communicate to come to conclusions, whereas perceivers communicate to explore possibilities. That's a major difference between the two, those two preferences. So the MBTI is looking for inborn traits, inborn preferences. On a deeper level, when we look at the cognitive functions, it goes into a lot more detail about how we do that, in the sense of our thinking. Are we an introverted or extroverted thinker? Are we introverted or extroverted feeler? And that's the same. Are we an introverted or extroverted sensor? Introverted or extroverted intuitive? And based on our functional stack, we can gain a huge amount of information. So it's really looking at, like I said, inborn preferences, inborn traits, how we naturally go about engaging with the world, and how we gauge internally. There's a real danger when we are trying to use the MBTI to explain something or justify something that it can't explain or justify. And I think there's a vulnerability, especially for young people that discover the MBTI, because of its power and the insights that it gives. People can think that or there's a vulnerability that people can think that it can explain everything, and the reality is that it can't. So there's a real danger with people trying to explain abnormal or unhealthy behaviour using the Myers-Briggs to essentially justify it. And that could cause all sorts of problems. And I would think that people that are doing that, what that is actually doing, I think, is speaking to something or an issue inside the person that is doing the justifying. So some of those dangers could be within relationship, where one person is using the MBTI to justify unhealthy behaviour in the other person, causing them then to normalize or justify that behaviour within the MBTI, and then staying in or putting up with behaviour that's inappropriate or damaging. For a person that's using the MBTI to justify other issues within the MBTI for themselves, then that can lead to them not really living out of the potential of what they could, and will stay stuck in some ways. So a way of looking at it is a person can be stuck in their life because of some other sorts of issues that the MBTI can't explain. Then they discover the MBTI and then sort of place the MBTI over those issues to sort of help justify it or cover over it. And that person will then sort of still stay stuck in that issue. And so I think the reality is that does happen and will happen, I think, until the person is sort of tired of the pain of things not sitting right within them, and then they're most likely going to be open to looking elsewhere for some answers that the MBTI can't explain. So a way of sort of utilizing the MBTI in regards to abnormal behavior is, rather than so you've got MBTI and then somebody sees an abnormal or unusual behavior and tries to find somewhere in the MBTI that actually explains that. It's like trying to fit. It's almost like trying to fit abnormal behavior within the theory, which it's actually not designed to do. The better way to go about that is to separate the two, essentially. So we've got the MBTI, and then we've got other issues. And how the MBTI can be utilized is, when we have an awareness of an issue, we can then go, okay, there's this specific issue. How might that issue manifest through a person's type? For instance, someone with depression, if they're an NF, that depression will manifest most likely differently through an NF versus an SJ or an SP in some cases. Somebody with a diagnosis of bipolar, that issue may present itself in different sorts of ways based on a person's type. So I think that's the best way to utilize the MBTI when it comes to people's other sorts of issues, as opposed to trying to fit that issue inside type to kind of normalize it or justify it. Now, I think that is a vulnerability for somebody who's researching the MBTI. They think they know their type, but then something's not sitting right, and they then spend hours and hours, days, weeks, months, years trying to figure out that missing link, that thing doesn't sort of fit right with their type. And it's quite possible, if somebody's doing that they're trying to find an answer to an issue that the MBTI can't explain. So let's say there's an unrealized anxiety within the person that they don't even know. So they don't know they've got the anxiety or depression or a rejection issue or something like that from childhood. Then that part of them will be sort of driving the research. Not that they'll be aware of it, they'll probably just know that something doesn't sit right, and they'll be trying to find an answer to that sort of unknown question that's there. And I think it's just maybe a guide or a warning sign that if somebody's spending lots and lots of time and not really getting anywhere with their MBTI research, it's most likely that they're trying to explain something, trying to find something in the MBTI to explain something that it can't explain. Now that's different to somebody that's found their type and they just love the MBTI and they want to learn more about it and they want to understand, go deeper into the cognitive functions and understand their type in lots of different ways. So that's a different place. than what I'm describing. Where there could be a slight perceived contradiction is what the MBTI calls the in the grip reaction, so that when that fourth inferior function takes over the person and they can start acting almost the opposite of their type, in a sense, because they're now living out of that fourth function, which is essentially the opposite of their dominant function. That is predominantly focused around stress. So it's like a stress reaction, and I think it's important to note that the in the grip reaction is explained within the theory of the MBTI. So it's actually been presented within the theory, within the concept of the MBTI. I think that's very different to the other sorts of issues that we can have that aren't explained in the MBTI. So there is kind of an apparent sort of overlap where it's like, well, what's an in-the-grip reaction stress response that can cause a person to behave in ways that look problematic and unhealthy and dysfunctional? And what are these other sorts of issues? And I think the answer to that essentially is an in-the-grip reaction can be a short-term event. So it could be a few hours, it could be a couple of days. I think it can also be a lingering long-term issue when a person's stuck in that fourth function, even if it's sort of on a minor level. I think if that's happening, that is because there are other issues that are there that is causing the stress that's leading to that in the grip reaction. So I think it's important to just put out there that the MBTI is about discovering inborn and innate preferences to explain essentially normal behavior. But when we've got risky behavior, dysfunctional, immature, these sorts of issues, childhood wounds and things like that, that can't explain it. The MBTI cannot explain those things, but it certainly can. Once we know what those issues are, we can see how those sorts of issues might manifest through a person's type. So I think that's a really important distinction to make. So I hope you found this video helpful. Feel free to visit my website, scottericmorgan.com, and I'll see you in another video.